I just wanted to put out my thoughts about a concept that I came up with a long time ago called inner activation. And it's something that I found increasingly important in this day and age. It basically covers three key things. The first one is to confront. Now, I know a lot of people don't like confrontation, but there's a caveat. I'll share that with you in a while. To confront, then to declare what you want to accomplish, go activate it, and then you arrive at what it is that you need. The problem with most people is that activation seems to be external. I've heard from leaders, from business founders and so on, who talk about how they always have to be there to drive a result. Well, the reason is that they're not internally activated. We understand the difference between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. Those who are more extrinsically motivated tend to fail more regularly, whereas those who are more intrinsically motivated tend to be more successful. So how do you get people to go through this confront, declare, and activate process? Well, it's very simple. Firstly, you need to understand what confrontation really means. Confrontation means taking a look at what you're avoiding and what you're afraid of, and really leaning into it. Confrontation is also about taking a look reflectively at patterns in your life that you've been constantly addicted to. In other words, you might notice that it causes a little bit of hazard for you as you go through your life. And more often than not, that is an accumulative cycle. One case in point is alcoholism. I'm not an alcoholic, but I came very close to it and I didn't quite like the idea. So when I first started, it was just based on pure enjoyment. I continued to cycle that through where one glass would turn to 2 to 3 and then it eventually blossomed to like 4 bottles of wine. Not only did I not know I was causing my body detriment, I was blaming the fact that I was tired on things that were outside of my control. Confronting is really taking a good, honest look at yourself and taking personal responsibility to say that this is going on and it's no good and therefore I'm going to back out of it. Now, suffice to say, for many people, they confront and they don't change because they're resistant, because there's a lot more psychological attachment to the thing that they are embarking on. And this has got to do with the science of addiction. So for example, if you take a look at the studies by Gabor Mate, who's a brilliant addiction specialist. He understands that the psychological trauma from childhood created self-soothing behaviors, and therefore those behaviors can't really be taken away. However, we need to utilize certain strategies. One strategy could be to project the worst case scenario into the future so that you can see what happens if it escalates again and again and again through your life. You might not have very much of a life left. The second thing you can do is take a look at how the impact of what you're doing is harming or causing damage to the people around you. That's another perspective you can take. Another one that you can use as a special technique is to look into yourself and find out the most powerful, most effective version of yourself that has dealt with something similar before. So these three are things that I do in my coaching and psychotherapeutic discourse where I attempt to find resources internally so that the confrontation becomes possible. I've done that with couples and suffice to say it has become quite a positive experience in their life to be able to practice, right? So whenever you confront, you practice. Whenever you avoid, you don't get practice. And if you don't get enough practice, whatever it is that you're unconsciously practicing continues to propagate and it goes out of control. So that's the first one. Get clarity on what it is that you need to confront. Go do the deed, improve along the way as if it's just the next thing. Number 2 is to declare. Now, declaration has to do with your ability to make a promise, right? To make a commitment. In other words, I declare that I will accomplish X or Y. Declaration is the process of speaking the truth into the world. Now, I have talked about the mastery triangle. If you haven't heard of the mastery triangle, it's somewhere in the description or around here in the cards later on. You will need to utilize language and your thought patterns in order to put this out into the world. I mean, if you consistently went out into the world and said, I'm going to find strategies that will help me to become a millionaire compared with I am a millionaire, one of those affirmations is more likely to work, right? Declaring that you are a millionaire is nice, but if you don't know how to do it and you can't find the approaches to be able to do it, then it's going to be a little bit troublesome. But both of them do go hand in hand, and you need to make that declaration to the people who are around you so that you can live into that belief. A lot of the time people misunderstand affirmations as if it's just wishful thinking. However, if you reconstruct it as a way to generate drive, who are you? What do you believe? What do you really want for your future? Declare those. And the more fervently you declare those, the more likely you'll be able to generate some kind of drive that gets you to activate towards the direction that you need. So after the confrontation process is done, you've come to a certain level of clarity and acceptance. Once you make a declaration, you're actually approaching it from a statement of commitment and utilizing the clarity to make that commitment. Imagine if you reversed it. You made a commitment without being clear. That's also going to be detrimental to you, right? Then the next one is to activate it. Activation is not just taking action. It really is galvanizing the resources from within you. So emotionally, you can actually bring back the best version of you by visualizing yourself being that best version who can take similar actions or at least small steps towards a big goal. And the more you do this, the more you realize you're practicing with courage, with conviction, and with excellence. So moving towards that direction is going to help you to get to where you want to go. Well, not necessarily where you want to go, but where you need to go, right? Because confronting is not a fun thing to do. But here are some advantages. First one, you become braver. You get a higher level of courage because you're willing to confront that which you're afraid of, right? So in most parts of psychology, we do something called desensitization training so that you constantly are in the position of observing, maybe even paying attention to, and maybe even deconstructing the threats that might be around you so that you no longer get to avoid it, but rather now you have to construct ways to deal with it or work with it or live with it, right? And at the end of the day, going through that path of difficulty and challenge actually lets you see that there's a different perspective. You can see that it's not that bad, perhaps, or you might see that there's an alternative solution or an alternative way of looking at things. When my business tanked, I mean, we were like minus $250,000, and it was not something that I would take very lightly. I laughed at it because I realized how stupid I was in making certain kinds of decisions. So in confronting that, I came to realize that, yeah, money and spending money is kind of like my Achilles heel. I spend it on a worthy cause at the drop of a hat. But in order for me to get forward and to be able to do things that I need, I have to come to terms with the fact that that's a weak spot and I need to clear that up. And so through the year, after that event took place, I began to take steps towards some form of ascension, right? Some way of moving away from the bad decisions and bad choices to becoming a little bit more frugal, a little bit more discerning in terms of my expenses. And of course, when I declare that, even in this video, it helps me to activate the way to say it to myself. And the more you do this, the clearer you do become. And as a result, if there's any deviation, you can confront that again, and it's going to be a confrontation to a lesser negative degree than before. Empathy. I found that in the past when I was not empathetic, I was kind of like snarky with some of my clients. I realized that it wasn't very helpful because I may not know their context. However, fast forward 20 years and all of a sudden I'm a little bit better because I understand everybody's going through their own piece of suffering. So by confronting that and declaring that, you know what, I'm going to lean into people who experienced similar problems in the past as I did, and I'm going to be as empathetic as I can because I know how painful it can be. So this kind of motion, this kind of movement is helping me to put out into the world the good that I know I can do. And as a result, I become more willing to suffer because on the other side of suffering is my own growth potential. On the other side of suffering, someone else who is not yet courageous to walk that path might need me to open up that pathway for them. So I'm very, very convinced that the inner activation approach is the thing to go for, and you really honestly want to focus on building that strength to start the ball rolling. Confront what you're afraid of, confront what you're avoiding, and then utilize that as a whetstone to sharpen your own edge. So if you like this, please click on the like button, hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon so that you'll receive all my updates every time I upload these on a regular basis. In the meanwhile, if you found that this was helpful, please comment down below which was most helpful for you, and I definitely appreciate it if you share it with somebody who's going to need to hear something like this. If you're a coach or a consultant or a therapist, this might also help you in some ways beyond just the general audience. so that we can all collectively, as a community, elevate society to a level that transcends pain and suffering so that they can all take actions to abundance.